Hey, this is David Hayter. You may know me as the screenwriter of films like X-Men, X-Men 2, and Watchmen, but you probably know me best as the voice of Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid. And you're listening to Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. Kept you waiting, huh?
All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Mikhail Kasanova, and I have the honor, the privilege, and I'm incredibly nervous and hyped at the same time. I'm just like a ball of different emotions right now. But to have the one, the only Matt McMuscles on the show. Matt, how you doing?
Hi, thank you for that amazing that introduction. I've never heard someone be so humbled over my very regular guy appearance. But thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh, anytime, man, anytime. And honestly, okay, so I look at it this way, man. It's not every
Break
day
it down for me.
What? It's not every day that someone like me, especially someone from Hawaii, we don't have a lot of interaction with people in the industry, content creators, voice actors, all that. And I'm really, especially with this show, I've really been trying to change this because I grew up here, and it's the main thing you can do out here, or that people push you to do, is to either go into construction, try to be a comedian, try to be a musician doing what's called Hawaiian, or the Hawaiian version of Jamaican music.
Okay.
Or, that's it. The bar of expectation is really low out here. And I'm like, we got gamers out here. We got people interested in the industry. Let's do something with that. And I've tried for years working with others. And I was like, fuck it, I'll just do it myself. So, it's good,
You seem to be well on your way, because we were just talking a little bit right before we started about I have a video game that I helped make out, and you had contacted me about possibly taking a look at it, an early build of it, and I remember that distinctly, because when I looked at everyone, because I had a lot of indie video game websites and whatever contacting me, and I would look at everyone a little bit, just check out their site or whatever, and I looked around on you, and I said, Hawaii's #1 podcast? Wow, okay. And after that, when you contacted me again about being on the show, I was like, oh yeah, right. Hawaii's #1 podcast. That's pretty cool, because while I've never been to Hawaii, I've always wanted to go. Me and my wife have. We should have gone obviously a couple of years ago before the troubles began, but in terms of traveling and such, so we always really wanted to go, and maybe in the future we certainly will, because it always seems like a chill place. But I get what you mean, being kind of more of an isolated area, that you would have certain expectations, and then, there's only so many things you can really excel at, right? So it's very cool that you've been able to sort of forge your own path and do something a little bit unexpected in terms of gaming and media and such.
I've been called, my in-laws are like, what the hell are you doing? Get a real job. Because before I went full-time, I was actually working at a hospital. I was a senior systems analyst doing telephony and whatnot with Cisco phones. And I did that for almost 10 years. And I enjoyed the work. I hate the politics of corporate America.
Yeah.
So I was dealing with that, and then I eventually just got to a point where I was like, it's either I take this chance and see if I can do something with this, or I just always wonder what if. And one of the things, I remember distinctly having a conversation with someone when I went in one of the ICUs, and I had to set up the phone there, and one of the people that was terminally ill, they were saying I'd always talk to them every day I would go in and work on that line. And then I remember them telling me about the things that they wish they could do, they wish they had done. And, you know, that person wasn't that much older than me. I'm 32. You know, this person was like 36, 37. And I was like, that started to click in my head, like, man, there's a lot of things I want to do, but I'm so stuck with what people here say, you know, that you can't do this, or you're only going to be able to do this, and don't jeopardize something secure, and my own fears of, am I good enough to do it? Which, you know, I was like, you know, what do I do? And thankfully my wife, she's also a content creator. She was like,
cool.
Just do it. And it was funny because I remember texting her and she sent me the Shia LaBeouf gift.
That's the one that'll get you motivated.
So I just took this chance, and like a lot of people are always telling me like, oh, all you do is play video games all day, and I'm like, playing video games is like 10% of what I do. Like content creating is not easy. You got to do video editing and audio engineering. You got to make sure you're good on social media, and it's hard, you know, being a smaller creator, trying to, you know, put your foot in the door and get yourself known. And I also wanted to thank you for the talk we had the other day, because I was feeling really low with that whole situation. But I appreciate you speaking to me, man. That meant a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like, because, you know, I've gone through those same bouts of like sort of doubt in regards to what I'm doing, and kind of like you, I was kind of told like, you know, no, stay with the secure thing that you're doing, which was at the time game testing, because being in Montreal, Canada, there's lots of video game publishers and developers, and it's an office job. And you know, if anyone thinks that what you do or what I do is just playing video games, I mean, it is, but like testing games is way different in compared to like, yes, you get to play a video game. You get to play the same one level of a video game for maybe 3 months over and over and over again. And you're going to be just typing things up. It's an office desk job where you're just typing things on the computer, same as any sort of thing that requires that type of tool set, but it was consistent. And as long as there was a video game that was being made, you had work to test it. So I made sure that when I was branching out to be like, you know, a content creator, YouTuber, whatever you want to call it, that I made sure I did both for as long as I could before it stopped making sense. Before I said to the consistent job, like, oh, I think I might want to like move on. But I did both for months because I didn't want to like drop one at the first sign that, you know, I was making a living by playing games and making videos and whatever. So I did try to make sure, but I still said, can I come back though if things don't work out? Can I just like, they're like, you're gonna have to apply again. I was like, okay, just want to make sure. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll have you again if you decide whatever it is. My boss didn't understand. My boss is like in video games, and he's just like, what? You're doing what? You're making game videos? Like how? What? I don't understand. And I was like, you don't need to understand. It's fine. But yeah, like I kind of, you know, still to this day, like I had something happen to me like 2 weeks ago, or something just wasn't working out, and I tried my hardest to get it to work out, but someone else told me like, no, this isn't going to like push forward, and we're just going to have to quit. And I was like, no, we can't. But it took me a while to even get that burst of like, no, we can't give up. Like we have to find a way to solve this problem. And then fortunately we're able to solve it, like a little bit more delayed than we wanted, but it still happened. But like I did have like a rough day where I was like, I didn't want to do anything. I just was like, oh, screw it. I guess I will give up on getting this one particular thing done. And unfortunately I didn't. And as long as you do have, you know, if you have a significant other that can help you through that type of stuff as well, and it always like is a big boon when you can have that extra support. Because like you just said, your wife is also a content creator, so she would totally understand. And like you just said, she She sent you a Shia LaBeouf gift, so that's all you really need at the end of the day.
Yeah, man, I'm very grateful for my wife because she's definitely my. I mean, I'm typically very much able to like just emotionally handle things on my own. Like I'm very, I guess you can say like classic 80s type of macho type of guy, but like there are times when I'm like, man, I'm just not feeling right, and then she helps me, work through that, and I appreciate her. I really do. But yeah, man, we're here to talk about you, not me. We're here to talk about you. So we're here to talk about your the YouTube career, being a QA tester, your video game. But let's start with the origin story of a young Matt McMuscles. What was that moment that solidified that gaming was for you? Like, what was that? We all have one. For me, it was strangely enough to say, Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, but then that transition.
Okay, I'm done with this podcast. I'm going to leave now because your example was Castlevania 2. Wow. Okay.
Hey, I was a kid. That was the first game I got to play, but Double Dragon is my obsession, man.
For me, okay, like we always got consoles way late in their life cycle that, the new hot shit was out. So I was kind of staggered in my like video game sort of knowledge base. So we had an Atari 2600 when the NES was like red hot. So like towards the end of the 80s, and we just get an Atari 2600 because my parents are just like, this is the one you want, right? And we're like, yeah, I guess. But I want to say like a lot of early titles on the NES, because as playable and as classic as some Atari games are, it's doesn't leave. Oh, it leaves a lot to the imagination because there's barely any graphics. But like so I would say like Mario Brothers, certainly. Double Dragon was actually certainly one for me as well. Double Dragon NES. I shouldn't give you guff about Simon's Quest because Double Dragon NES is no masterpiece. But it did leave quite an impression. And I think around that age, I was bouncing around between things. Like, oh, I really I'm into dinosaurs. Oh, now I'm into superheroes really hard. Oh, now I'm into like this. And like, I would kind of drop out of some of them. And superheroes always kind of remained a thing, obviously. But like, video games always kind of stuck around. It's like, oh, now I want the next console. I want the next console. My parents, I think they said something akin to, yeah, he's not growing out of this. So this is a problem. It was only until like the GameCube where I finally got a console when it was new, when it was like hot, and I actually had some of my own money to like spend on it because I was dependent on my parents up until that point. So, and that's I think when the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox really hit, and you're starting to reach like you're in your late teens, you start to like get really into games in a certain way. You can certainly grow out of them. I've heard people say like, oh, I haven't played a game, and like I used to love games all the time, and when I was like 15 or 16, but I grew out of them. Like I think that's not the right term. I don't think it's grow out of them. I think it's just lose interest. I think that's that growing out implies that you're too adult for them. I don't understand, but I think that is also the time in my late teens where I was like, I either wanted to work in games in some fashion. I don't know exactly what, because testing games wasn't really it was certainly a thing, but you weren't aware of it yet because you'd only be exposed to game magazines that wouldn't really talk about the process all that much. So, but it's certainly around then. And I think another big one was Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, because I knew that was being made in my city, Montreal. And I was like, holy crap. Yeah, that's, oh, wow. I wonder, where are they? Where are these Prince of Persias that they're making this game? I tried to do as much research as I could back then. I'm like, oh, it's Ubisoft. And yeah, that's that game company. Because that's when I was starting to be aware of Ubisoft in general. And they got the Tom Clancy license and Prince of Persia and Rayman and stuff and such. So I think that was other big factor when I realized that like a game is being made in my city, like that. Those kind of it turned like a light switch on in my head, I guess you could say.
Okay. Yeah, like, and it's kind of crazy. Like when I talk to a lot of the younger generation, they're interested in getting into like content creating or the video game industry. Like I've spoken at all the universities out here prior to COVID, prior to this whole shutdown thing. But I would speak to them and they would always ask like, oh, how do I get in the industry? It must be hard to get into the industry. And I'm like, you didn't grow up in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Like we had no idea back then how to get into the industry, how to even communicate with them. I'm like, you guys have it a lot easier now because you have social media. You have the ability to just directly communicate with like, you know, people to develop games, the PR side of it. Well, like if you have any questions, usually go to any company's website, go to their contact us, and you can reach out there, or you can just tweet to them.
Literally has never been easier than it is today.
Never been easier.
Kids.
But yeah, I know, right? But it's like it's amazing seeing how far gaming has like evolved from like what it was on the Atari. Because I also had an Atari 2600. My mother and my dad, they were the same like yours. Like they were very slow on getting us consoles. Like, and it's funny too because like the GameCube was also, I had that day one, and that was, I had that and Smash Brothers Melee, and I was like, yeah, I'm ready. And I didn't get another game for like 2 years because my parents are like, yep, you wasted 2 years of your allowance on that, and you're not getting anything else. I'm like, seriously? I got this one game? Yeah, so I had to make it work.
Yeah, I was a big renter, so I'd only ever have like 1 or 2 games max. I think like I don't even remember what I owned on. I don't even think I owned a game on the GameCube for a while. Like I just kept renting. Maybe Wave Race, Blue Storm, but I didn't think I got another one until Metroid Prime. And then after that, I want to say like something stupid like Turok Evolution, and then maybe RE4. But yeah, I spent most of my youth at that time in a Blockbuster, trying to rent something, like anything really. And if you're going to a store and you're renting, or like whatever it is nowadays, if you have a modern console and you're using Game Pass or some such service, PlayStation Now, if you're like checking out a lot of games, it's fair to say that you're going to be in this hobby industry, or be interested in the industry for a long time. Like if you're constantly checking out games and being interested in them nowadays, when there's so much other stuff you could be exposed to, movies, books, what have you, then it's very safe to say that gaming is indeed for you.
Yeah. And one of the things, like, I'm glad you brought up Blockbuster, because oh my god, the amount of money I sunk into Blockbuster when I was a kid.
I thought you were going to say the amount of money that they stole from you in regards to late fees.
That too,
right? I owed them like $70, but then they went out of business. So I was like, yes, game the system. I feel like Dead to Rights Reckoning for the Xbox 360. It was some like bad 7th gen game, if I recall.
Oh god, I remember that, man. I remember.
No, you don't. Nobody does.
No, dude, I remember I got that, and I was like, okay, this game it's going to be somewhat decent, right? Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, you're saying Blockbuster.
I was going to say like with the whole concept back then for us was like renting games at Blockbuster. I remember when we had the 64, like the only game I owned for the 64, I only had 2 games I owned, which was GoldenEye and Zelda. Those are the only 2 games that my parents got at launch for me and my siblings when the 64 came out. But other than that, dude, we rented Mario 64 so many times. It was ridiculous. I'm like, I remember straight up asking my parents, I'm like, can we just buy it? They're like, no, we're going to rent it. We rented that game for effectively 1 whole year. And this was before, I remember for us,
That's
like,
more than the game cost. Mathematically. Okay, mom and dad.
Mm-hmm. So
Try to teach me to be financially responsible. You're not setting a good precedent.
I remember, like, I remember, like, that was back before, like, rentals were like more than 5 days. They were like, I think 3 days, and it was like,
I remember 3 days and then like a week. Like certain
yeah,
things. I have a big memory of that.
And I think it was like, God, how much was it? It was like $7 or $8 back then before they dropped it to like the $5 tier. And it was like, I remember as a kid when I was like adding that up, I was like, Mom, that's going to cost more than just buying it. She's like, no, it's fine. Yeah. Dude, like the whole concept of like renting games back in the day, like it was, a part of me misses it, but at the same time, a part of me doesn't, given nowadays, like all games that come on disc now, they're just DRM checks. So it's like,
yeah, but imagine you go right now and you're like, okay, I'm gonna buy Assassin's Creed Valhalla or whatever, digitally, and then you get a message pop up. Sorry, they got them all. Everyone else, it's out. We don't have a digital piece of data anymore. They got all of them, so you're gonna have to wait until someone refunds it. Like, so when you put in that context, you think about renting back then, you're like, why did we put up with that? No, you don't get the game. Sorry, it's gone. I'm like, no. Compared to nowadays where it's like, oh, Xbox Now, here's like 50 free games or whatever it is. And it's again, nowadays it's much easier to consume video games in whatever way you see fit, like digitally or physically.
Would you say it's also like harder to keep up with it now? Like looking at
absolutely. Don't even finish the rest of your question because the answer is yes.
Like, because I'm noticing it. I wasn't sure if it's because like I review games now or I cover games that it's difficult to keep up, because it seems like for us growing up, games had months or years being like on a pedestal of this is what you need to be playing. And it didn't seem like there was as much coming out like it is now. Like now a game comes out, you got 2 weeks and then it's old news. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like my backlog, I feel like has quadrupled in the last, 5 years of doing this than ever when I was a kid.
Yeah. And of course there's just more stuff like aside from games, like especially like depending on what age you are and what have you, like, you should be watching stuff on Netflix or Amazon, or you should be doing this or that, or you should be, there's like a million other things. So much more so than when you were a kid, I think, like, but my backlog is, I don't even really have a backlog. I just have a log in general. It just never leaves. Like I bought, downloaded, have never booted up Ghost of Tsushima, for example. Just was going to do it, and I just can't. Like, I can't start like a 40-hour free roaming game right now. I bought Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I played a couple hours of it, and it's like I'm never probably going back to it. I like it fine too, but it's just I can't like. I mean, I've talked about this in the past, but it's just like a game needs to be really special when it's like one of those long, get the check mark off all the things you need to do style game, whether it be an Ubisoft one or like a Sony one, like Ghost of Tsushima, or I'm just like, I can't right now. That's why the game that I did finish that was relatively new is Miles Morales, just because it's like a 9-hour game. And it's everything that Spider-Man 2018 was, just condensed and smaller and in a good way, where I can go back and play it again. There's some things I didn't do, but like I was able to do almost everything. And when people talk to me about this, they're like, well, I really like long games. And I'm like, that's great. I don't think the long games will ever go away. I'm not saying to abolish them. I just think some game companies could probably take a look at, instead of releasing instead of Ubisoft releasing 3 free roaming open world like Watch Dogs Legion and Assassin's Creed like in the same month almost, maybe there could be one that's a bit shorter. I'm just saying, just for variety's sake.
Yeah.
Because every game that I have that I'm like, oh, I wanted to try that. It's Final Fantasy VII Remake. Yeah, I played the first couple hours. I liked it. I just can't right now. And that's just for me. If someone does have that time and dedication, then like more power to them.
I was wondering if that was because my wife and I, we frequently have this conversation as well about that very thing. Because it feels like, and I'm not sure if it's just, you know, where we are in our lives at this point, but it's like the idea of investing that much time into a long game just seems too much. Like, and I feel like we have more 40, 50, 60, 70 hour games now than we used to have back on the old generation. Like,
I think you're right. As the technology improves and they could put more game in, like they will, because there's certainly the people that want that, and that does need to be fed. Like that game does need to be there. But I do feel like sometimes it's overwhelming. It's like the 2 games I just cited. Cyberpunk obviously is another big one. I am currently writing a video. I should finish it today. I'm currently writing a video on Panzer Dragoon Saga, which I never played. I don't even know much about. I know that well, now I know more, but beforehand, my whole thought on it was, oh, that's the Panzer Dragoon game. That's an RPG. That's all I knew. Because there's like 1,000 copies in circulation. That's it. That's all they ever made, you know? And it is a 20-hour RPG that has no grinding, no fetch quests. There's only 2 members that you ever get in your party. And it's made by people that made an RPG that are like, I don't like a lot of stuff that are in RPGs. So let's make one that's different. Let's make one that cuts out everything that Final Fantasy was doing at the time, which was fetch quests, which was a cast of dozens and dozens. And they made that back then in 1998, and very, very different. When I looked it up, I was like, what type of review scores? The people must have hated this. Like, it gets 9s and 10s across the board because it was something different, and it was made by people that are like, you know, we don't need a 50-hour story spread out that has peaks and valleys of interest. Like, oh, I don't really care about this part. I hate this dungeon, blah blah blah. So let's focus the story on like 2 or 3 characters. And like, I just assumed that since that was really against what the industry was doing in the tail end of the 90s, like games were getting bigger. Final Fantasy VII, Ocarina of Time, Metal Gear Solid, and I was shocked to see that the scores were so glowing. And then, you know, I'm writing this video, and like, this game has not been preserved at all. You cannot. It is not available on any digital service. It was never ported to anything except the Saturn. The Saturn is not an easy console to emulate. There was only 1,000 European copies of this game ever made for all of Europe, because the Saturn was dying and they didn't have any shelf space. Like, no stores would barely stock it. So there's only 1,000 of those. There's 25,000 copies in North America. Like, the most copies were in Japan, but it's in Japanese and it's a long RPG. So I was just shocked that like such a well-regarded game is like, and there's one thing I read is that there are rumors that Sega just threw out the source code because they lost a lot of source codes and game assets towards the end of the 90s, because they did like a big reshuffling to they closed down a lot of teams and folded them in to other teams. So I've read that before, that like lots of franchises had a lot of their material and assets and marketing stuff all just thrown into a dumpster somewhere. And Panzer Dragoon Saga is one of those games. And I tried to look it up, and even the creator of the series is like, I don't know. I don't know if it was. I left the company before any of that happened, so I don't know what the truth of it is. So just going back to like nowadays, where it's like, you know, you get those nice single player, you know, smaller titles like Miles Morales, or trying to think of like, you know, Near Automata is a long game, but it's, you know, not unmanageable. So every time those games come out, I gravitate towards them because I'm like, yes, give me like 20 hours is kind of, I think that's as long as a game, for me personally. I think that's as long as a game story should ever be. Anything longer than that, it's spread out too much. There's going to be bits that are not going to be good. I mean, the same thing goes for a regular movie, like when you watch in the theater or download at home. You know, a movie like, I love the Lord of the Rings movies, don't get me wrong, but if someone's good, what do you want to watch? The extended? Oh, I don't want to watch the extended version. I'm good. Again, that's just for me. There's lots of people that want all that stuff, and I get that. But for games especially, like for movies, it's not that bad. You can make a day of it, watch like a 4-hour movie, but you can't make a day of playing a 50-hour like Assassin's Creed or a Witcher or a Cyberpunk or what have you. Then and just where I am in my life, I certainly can. I feel like if I was a kid, I could do it though. I feel like the kid power would propel me, but I can't where I am in life currently.
Dude, think about all the games that when we were kids, like we would just power through, even though they like even the terrible ones, you just power through them.
Yeah.
A lot of the things, like I go back and I play and I'm like, God, why did I like that? Like one of the games, like this is a game I have a love-hate relationship, and it's Blue Stinger for Dreamcast. Like I love that game, but I hate it at the same time because it's got some jank to it. But when I was a kid, I was like, man, I'm going to play through this. And I remember, I think 100%ed it when I was a kid. And that was like one of the things I would always do as a kid. But like now as an adult, I'm like, nah, that's
I'm good. And like Blue Stinger, I first saw the screenshots of Blue Stinger in a gaming magazine. It was one of those games where it said graphics are never going to get any better than this. It's impossible. How? You'd have to have 1 million monkeys typing at 1 million keyboards to get like a game to look better than this. And I played it not too long ago on my channel, and I was just like, you're very right. It's very jank. It is charming though. So it is something that you can kind of go back to. 100%ing it though, yeah, no, I'm good.
Man, and like with Panzer Dragoon Saga, like I've had so many opportunities to get it. Like there was
really? For how much?
Okay, so true story, and this is one of the pains of being an adult for you young people out here who don't have to deal with rent bills and all that stuff. So I had a chance to get mint condition 150 case.
Really?
Book 150. This was probably, I want to say like 2012, 2011. I had that chance. I passed on it because I'm like, do I get this and add it to my collection? Do I pay the rent?
Yeah.
So I chose that. And then every other time I've had the chance of getting it, I was like, okay, so it went up from 150. Here's one for 300. Here's one for 5. Here's one for 6. And I'm like, I don't know. And now when I look it up, it's like over $1,000. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have that kind of money to spend.
Right.
I want it because this is the last that would complete my Saturn collection for the Panzer Dragoon Saga. Well, series, not saga. Because I've got one, I've got Zwei. I just need that, but like I'm just not willing to pay that. But I never got to play it. And
yeah,
like,
not $1,000 certainly. Yeah. Like there's one game I ever spent like a bunch of money on that was, I mean, I shouldn't even really talk, but like Final Fight Revenge on the Saturn. And that was like the last US Saturn game. It released in 1999. And it was just like, the Saturn is a weird thing because Sega really just doesn't want to talk about it, just skips over it. They're like, here's the Genesis Mini, yay. Yeah, what about some other consoles? They're like, oh, you guys love Dreamcast, right? Wasn't there a console in between that? Nope. the Genesis, and then you jumped straight into the Dreamcast. Oh, it's weird because I could have thought, no, you know. And since the Saturn is notoriously hard to emulate accurately, that's not even that viable. And since Sega's out of the hardware business in general, there's like they don't have another like they're not like Sony where they can be like, well, we can finagle PlayStation 1 support in somehow, blah 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 blah. So there's just no avenue for Saturn games. I own like a dozen Saturn games. I don't have a Saturn. That's where I am with my life. Mm-hmm. I can't play these, but I want them. Maybe I'll get a Saturn one day. I don't know. Maybe I can find a place that mods Saturns and makes, because Saturns also have notoriously like faulty CD drives and things, mm-hmm. and they kind of tend to break down a lot. And it's just like the one console that I think is like very inaccessible. In a lot of guys is like Nintendo pretty good at like there's plenty of N64 games that you could download you could get on the Wii U, I think. And Super Nintendo games obviously, but it's like out of all things like this Saturn, just I don't want to say never, but probably will never, like I do not see Sega ever doing like a classic Sega Saturn like console. They'll just jump straight to the Dreamcast, because Dreamcast incredibly easy to emulate and pirate, and much to Sega's downfall. But yeah, like it's sad. But like $1,000 for Dragoon, you should have not paid your rent that 1 month though. for 120, like that was a mistake, because you could have sold it for a profit.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I have a Saturn. I was able to find it. I actually found it at a Savers, or was it Savers or Goodwill? I found it for like $5, and it was just the console itself. It didn't come with power cables or anything like that. Okay. I was like, oh, I'll get it, and then I'll go on eBay or Amazon and get all the additional stuff to make it work. I've never done it. I was just like, I'll eventually get there.
That is weirder than me, because I don't even have the console, but you have the console, but you don't get the things that make it work. So
I don't even have the controller.
Weirder. I have a fucking Jaguar that works. Like I got that, but I don't have the Saturn.
Oh man. With modern consoles though, like so what do you think? What are your thoughts so far on like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox? The Series X.
I've been able to say it consistently now, but I didn't think I'd get there initially. I was like, no, I'm not saying any of this bollocks. I'll just say the new Xbox, and now it's kind of stuck in my head. Okay, Series X and what have you. I don't have a Series X. I did try, but I didn't try very hard. I looked around and just didn't see it. I was like, okay, screw it. I'll get one when I get one. Now that the Game Awards finished yesterday, now I definitely will get one because everyone want to play Perfect Dark.
Yep.
But yeah, I have a PlayStation 5, and I honestly haven't used it that much, but that's not really the PlayStation 5's fault. There's just, I got Miles Morales. That's why I got it. And yeah, it's on the PS4, but I did want to, experience it in the best light I could. And I did finish that. And I think the console so far, I have no problems with it. I enjoy the controller. I never really, the PlayStation 4 controller is fine. I always hated the PlayStation 3 controller. It just never felt great to me. It just felt very clicky and cheap and plasticky. DualShock 4, obviously, an improvement, but I really like the PlayStation 5 controller. And there's one or two games I was thinking maybe I should get that on PlayStation 5 just to see. But yeah, its future seems quite rosy. Yeah, they're going to be getting lots of announced games that have like release dates, especially with the Game Awards. A couple of games got the release dates. Returner by Housemarque seems like it's going to be an interesting one. So I think they're all good. Like honestly, you just announce like a Bloodborne 2 or another exclusive like game from Software, and the PlayStation 5 is going to be fine until until the end of time, I guess. Series X, though, I've said this a couple times to friends. I'm like, sure wish there was any reason to play it right now, because it's like, oh, The Medium, oh, that's a survival horror game. It's going to be out on PC as well the same day. Okay, well then I'm not going to spend the $500 then. When it gets an exclusive game, and maybe Perfect Dark will be an exclusive game, or it could be on PC as well. But that will be the one to spur me to get it. If I see it in the store and I did well that month on my channel, I might pick it up then if I see it. But I'm not going to be actively searching for it. And it's a weird thing because Microsoft is being very, very consumer friendly by saying, yeah, this is going to be on the PC, so you don't have to. We're giving you options, and they're making money off the PC version. It's like Sony. I guess Nintendo could do that to a point as well, but man, playing Nintendo games on not a Nintendo console, that actually feels wrong. That feels like wearing somebody else's pants, It's very strange. And to a point, it feels strange if Sony was to do it too, but they're at least dabbling in it with Horizon, but they haven't made many plans about that or talked about putting more games on the PC. But it's like it shoots Microsoft in the foot a little bit. It gives people options, which is good, but it then doesn't really make the Xbox Series X that alluring. But I guess if you don't game on your PC at all, then yeah, there's certainly more reason to get it. Like, I use my Xbox One the most out of any of the last gen consoles. Like, I would turn my PS4 on when there was an exclusive game that I wanted, but everything else I did on the Xbox, multiplats, Netflix and movies, I would just use that as my primary thing. And I downloaded a lot of backwards compatible 360 and all that backwards compatibility stuff is great. Just right now, for $500 or whatever, how much it costs to invest in that now to do that same stuff. They really needed to announce a new Killer Instinct for me to, because that's why I got the Xbox One originally. It wasn't for Rise, Son of Rome, and it wasn't for Dead Rising 3, but it was for Killer Instinct. And even if they announced we're doing an Xbox Series X version of it, it's going to do this and it's going to do that, and we're going to fill in some of the missing gaps of content. Keats always hates it when I mention this because he's like, no, we finished the game. It's completed. And I was like, yes, it is. You did a great job. But how come there's no alternate costume for Shadow Jago? How come that character doesn't have their own stage? How come that character doesn't have an ultimate finishing move? I just if they announced just the base game that just filled out those things are missing, I would have gotten the console in a heartbeat for that, because I love that game so much. But they certainly with Perfect Dark, and I think there was one or two things maybe announced last night at the Game Awards as well that was oh, okay, that's cool. And obviously the Bethesda acquisition will make sure that they have a lot of content, but it's not going to be for a while. So once that does happen and a lot of big things start coming on the Xbox, then the PS5 and Xbox conversation gets a lot more interesting. Because right now they perform very similarly, both machines. One does maybe other things slightly better, slightly differently. The PlayStation 5 controller is certainly a bit more interesting and has some quirks about it that are at least unique compared to the Xbox Series X controller, so there's not that much to say there. But once those big games start coming out, and hopefully if they do take their time with them and they are good and not rushed out, then that it'll be a lot more interesting conversation. Because for now, there's not super much to say. I do like the design of both consoles. I just think they're stupid, both of them, and I like that because the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were just yeah, here's these black bricks, and they just kind of sit there, I guess. But because these consoles are so stupid looking, I'm like, yes, it's exactly what I want. I want the Okama game sphere. I want silly looking consoles. That's the best. It's much more fun to me than when things are just like, it looks like a DVD player or a Blu-ray player or what have you. So yeah, I guess that about sums up my thoughts so much. Like I haven't played Demon Souls or anything like that yet. But again, lots of games to play. And I don't really have time to delve into. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any big exclusives coming on the PS5 until next year. So, yeah, that's about it.
You remember all the memes for the Xbox when it was first revealed?
I don't remember a lot of them.
Dude,
I just remember how bad Kinect was.
Oh God. Okay.
My Xbox One Kinect broke down within like a month.
Are you serious?
Like the camera unit, it just stopped. It just stopped, and I was like, "Well, good. I wasn't gonna do anything with you." And then it discontinued it altogether, the camera or whatever. So, not that big of a deal.
I remember when, because I was actually working for Microsoft back during the last couple years of the 360 into the Xbox One. I actually moved back to Hawaii because I was in Redmond, Washington.
Okay.
When I was working for Microsoft at the time, and then when they decided, hey, we're gonna open up a store here, in Hawaii. Like, Mikhail, would you like to go there? I was like, yeah. So I went from doing QA testing, which I can understand, like that is very monotonous, mind-numbing work. It's fun. It can be fun, but doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over can get to you. But like going from that to the retail side where I was helping open up the store and all that, I remember looking at the 360 and the direction Microsoft was going with gaming. I was like, you guys had a clear lead over Sony with the PlayStation 3. And then you just were like, we're just going to do Kinect. And I remember a lot of us that were working with Microsoft at the time, we were like, what are you guys doing?
To be fair, it's like it was worth a shot. You know what I mean? Like, play your hand at it, see where it goes. It could very well become a thing. And the Kinect did sell like really, really well, but it was never a thing that was going to last. But when I think back at that time, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't great, and nothing really worked very well for the Kinect. But at the same time, it was like at least you took a chance. Maybe you shouldn't have in retrospect, obviously, but when I think back on it, it's like the PlayStation Move was like far more forgettable, and like okay, maybe embarrassing is a strong word to use, but I'm going to use the word embarrassing anyway. It's like the Kinect was at least like a different thing, whereas like the Move was just. I remember the giant E3 ad of that old man that Sony used for all their marketing. Was that old guy? What was his name? Sony man.
Yeah, because he was almost all.
Butler. And it was this huge ad of him holding the PlayStation Move, and he's like mimicking like he's shooting a bow and arrow, and it says, "This changes everything." And back then, I was like, "Are you serious? Like, you're acting like the Wii didn't change everything." Because it did for that entire generation. Like this, and it's just this old asshole pretending to shoot a bow and arrow. And I was like, it's the exact same thing as the Wii remote. Maybe it's slightly better. I don't know. I have used the Move several times, but I was just like, I kind of almost feel like one of them should have tried. But the fact that both of them tried to emulate that success and Sony did it really, really flagrantly, like, it's called the PlayStation Move, and we called it something different, but it's the same thing. Oh wait, we used the PlayStation Eye that was in development years ago, and we came up with the okay, buddy. I just find the seventh generation is like the seventh generation of consoles was way more interesting than like this, like the sixth one, like PS2, Xbox, GameCube. Those are very similar machines for all intents and purposes. but the 7th generation was just crazy. It's like everyone's just trying to get paid, just trying to get that cheddar, and they're doing anything they can. They're like, oh, game's going this way, let's do this. Let's like, no, just stay in the course, just keep doing what you're doing, man. You'll be fine. So I think nowadays it's like slightly different. Like it kind of goes back to both Sony and Microsoft saying, yeah, maybe we should just focus on games. Maybe we should, like, you can obviously download movies and whatever, but let's just make game machines and let's not try to be anything different than that. I mean, PlayStation VR is certainly a thing, way less of a thing than when it launched, obviously, but
yeah,
I had a PlayStation VR unit for a little while. I used it a couple times. I got sick once, so kind of done with that. I don't know where VR is going, if anywhere. Like my friend Liam is the only person that talks about VR to me. So when he tells me about this game, he's like, oh, there's a new Medal of Honor VR game. I was like, oh, I had no idea. And he's like, yeah, no one really talks about it. I'm like, okay. So yeah.
I remember getting flack a couple years ago because I got the HTC Vive, and I'm like, it's nice, but I don't see this really being as huge of a hit as it was hyped to be. Mm-hmm. And so many people gave me flack for it, and here we are all these years later, and it's like VR, it's a thing, but it's not groundbreaking.
Really a thing.
Like
it's half a thing.
A minuscule thing.
All I know is that, like, okay, so Oculus and all the other ones, right? Like they're in their own bubble, and like I don't pay attention to it, but certainly there's marketing. Certainly they're putting the word out, but like I kind of look at Sony, and it's like the entire year leading up to PlayStation 5. Like if they've talked about VR, then I don't remember them doing that. You know what I mean? Like they just stopped talking about it, and that doesn't say a whole lot about it in general. I mean, was it profitable? Probably was. I'd like to think it was. I feel like they did at least a solid 2 years of games on the regular coming out, but I mean, I'd be really surprised if like any big PlayStation 5 VR games are pushed at all. Not to say that there would be zero, but I think they're just going to focus on games and the controller, because the console's already expensive as it is, and telling people like, oh, then buy this other thing, and the PlayStation 4 VR is not like compatible or anything. I don't believe it is. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of doubt they'll do much with it.
All right, shifting gears. Dude, let's talk content creating. So,
yes,
I know you've been a content creator for 20 years. But
yeah,
with being on the YouTube platform and on Twitch and everything, like walk us through, like, what was the deciding factor for you to just decide, hey, I'm going to be a content creator? Is it just something you've always done or always enjoyed, or?
Well, when you say 20 years, it was because I talked about making anime music videos circa like 2000, 2001.
Those are huge back then.
They were AMV.org, I think, was one of the websites. Anyway. I think because after music videos, I started making like sillier little things with animation, mostly like taking old video game cartoons. And I think like Street Fighter, Darkstalkers, Mega Man, Double Dragon. I think it was those things that really, the Lonely Island, if people remember Lonely Island, the comedy troupe. I remember seeing the videos of their pitch for a show called Awesome Town, and it was just silly, comedic vignettes. And that was kind of a big influence, strangely. And since I was doing QA at the time for video games, it kind of led naturally into video games and such. And after doing Let's Plays for almost 10 years, you obviously want to start doing different things. And throughout that 10 years, like I would occasionally dip into something else, like, check out these action figures, like do a little unboxing, or talk about a particular series that meant a lot to me. And eventually it's like, when you're let's playing, it can certainly, especially on Twitch, because you have an audience to interact with. When you're let's playing, there's only a certain amount of creativity and things you could do with it before it stops becoming a let's play, before I get something. And I think over time, more and more, I just naturally wanted to do like more stuff akin to that. Like, instead of doing a blind let's play where I'm bumbling around for however long, it's one of the things I've done on my channel recently is kind of do more narrated, like, let's plays of I'm currently still, I need to finish it, currently still doing Simpsons Hit and Run, where I play the game, but I'm writing a script as I play it. And lots of other YouTubers have started to do this as well. Civi 11 is a big one. And God, there's a couple of others. Mandalore Gaming. I've recently gone to Mandalore Gaming. He has a very good channel where he completes the entire game, and it makes it like it's about an hour, but you basically see everything that like a game really has to offer. So I find those really, really interesting to me, and I think that's currently where like my head's at doing, because I love talking to the audience in a more prepared way, where I could play with expectations a little bit more, and you could put out tropes, like if you do a series of videos, like I'm sure but for the audience, I do a series called What Happened, and I can return to motifs and jokes and then play with those jokes a bit more, which is in the limiting environment of what a let's play traditionally is supposed to be. You can only, like, and as I get older, you can only think as quickly as your brain works. So I kind of feel that more written, produced stuff is kind of where I shine, and it's where I'm having a lot of fun right now. And it all kind of builds from like a big ball. So like I said, like those Street Fighter cartoon things where I was just mashing up and showing off the silliest moments of those, and then that leads to video games, and that leads to another thing. And I feel like, for me personally, it's almost comfortable like just doing Twitch for the rest of their life as a content creator, or they whatever it is. Eventually, for me, I kind of feel like I need to change every so often the style and stuff in which I do. And maybe after a couple of years, I might like stop doing it altogether, or drastically cut down and do something else. Like we were talking about the TakeOver earlier, and I have like one or two other game projects that I'm kind of tinkering with in the background that really, really get me excited, because I learned a lot working on the TakeOver, like from things I didn't even think of, like, oh yeah, I forgot we have to do that, and that will lead into that. Oh, okay. And I made like a text document just reminding me of all the things that, like, remember to do this, remember to do that, because I learned about it much later than I should have. So when I do a second game project and it really gets up there, I'm excited at that prospect of having learned a lot and then applying it, like on a completely different sort of project. So the future is always pretty exciting. If you we were saying before we started, it's like think a little bit ahead. You don't have to plan out every single move, but have something kind of waiting in the wings just in case, and then you'll always be excited about what you're doing next.
That's and that's something at the 5 or 6 years I've been doing YouTube. I've looked at the landscape, and I love video games, but I'm also like going back to what we were talking about earlier about the struggle with playing longer games, and getting to the point where I can work with companies, or get review copies of it and cover it, and doing written reviews for my website. I kind of got to a point where I'm like, I don't want to just box myself in to just video games, which is what led to the podcast. And I'm like looking like, you know, of course my family dynamic is about to change. In like 3 months as of this recording, I'm about to have my daughter. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to have less time to play games, especially long ones. So I'm thinking like, okay, what do I want to do? And I know it's kind of strange. Maybe it's just YouTube algorithm. There was a point where I was doing everything on my YouTube channel. I was streaming on it. I was putting up my reviews. I was putting up my podcast. I was doing a whole lot of different things, even music, because I have a background in music.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like maybe, I guess, for my channel, I was doing too much, because YouTube is like, what the hell do we do with your channel?
Mm-hmm.
So I think more so with the streams, like my views start tanking. So I used to go from several thousand every single video to I'm lucky if something doesn't do well. And this is within this year alone. So like I kind of cut it down to, what do I want to do? I want to do my podcast because I want to interview great guests like yourself. I want to do my reviews, and I kind of want to keep it to that. I dabbled with streaming again on YouTube, and then like I think I streamed Dirt 5, and I immediately got hit with so many copyright claims. I was like, fuck that, I'm going back to Twitch. So it's like, I think longevity wise, like as far as like I'm very similar to you, because I'm always like, I may change something up.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I feel like your audience may or may not be completely okay with that change. Like when I decided I wanted to focus more of my YouTube channel on my podcast and then reviews, a lot of my audience that was there for streams, they're like, oh, I don't like this direction. And I'm like, well, you can catch my streams over on Twitch. I'm just going to build that up. I want to have my portfolio work. So like if I want to go in any different direction, say I want to cut back, or if I want to no longer do content creation, but I want to work for a game company, or I want to work for another tech company. All right, cool. Well, I did this. And it's just different things. I think the older I'm getting, the more I'm like, okay, am I going to do this forever? Maybe not, but I don't know. You know, it's definitely, I think, I know I'm kind of all over the place. I'm gonna bring it.
So was I. Don't worry about it.
So like, I think, especially when it comes to like getting into this field, as far as longevity, your longevity is constantly changing.
Mm.
I feel like you have to mix it up. You have to experiment with different things, because I think if you're just doing one thing over and over and over, and I was actually talking to Boogie about this not long ago, Boogie 9228 or 9288, about having to constantly change it up, because it's not easy just doing one thing straight through.
Yeah,
you gotta do something else. But I don't know. It's
like you, I was like 2-3 years ago. I was streaming pretty regularly, like once or twice a week. Was making stuff on my channel. I was making stuff on the best friend's channel. I was designing a game. No, that's not doable. So at the time I was like, I have to cut back on one of the things, and that had to be streaming, unfortunately. While I really enjoyed doing it, I mean, for me, it was hard, like to, set up everything, and like, I didn't have a prepared studio or anything. Obviously, doing it in your apartments. One thing, if you have like a dedicated streaming setup over there, you sit down, you press the buttons. But the streaming was just a thing I kind of fell into for fun, just because Mac's such a huge inspiration to me in general. So when I watch him stream and see how much effort he puts into it, I was like, okay, well, let me try streaming and see if I like it. But then eventually I was like, no, well, one thing has to sort of take a back seat, and it had to be streaming, just because I wasn't set up properly, and it wasn't something I wanted to do long term. I didn't even take donations. Like, I didn't make any money on my Twitch just because I didn't feel comfortable charging anybody. I mean, if people subscribed eventually when I became a partner, then good on you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate that. But like, I would never ask, I did not have donations set up for the first couple of years, because I was just like, I'm just doing this for fun. I'm just messing around, really. So, but I've told this to other people too. Just like, if you think you need to stream, put stuff on YouTube or where else. And if you're juggling so many things, like you're gonna burn yourself out like easily.
Yeah.
And you do have to focus. And like for you, if you have someone or a few people saying like, oh, I don't really like this change, like you have to prioritize yourself and what makes the most sense. Like, first, you do have to take your audience into consideration, but the changes that you're talking about are like minor, like in the grand scheme of things. It's like, instead of clicking over here, you just click over here. Now it's, it's not the a drastic sweeping change. So you do have to focus on yourself and do what makes sense for you and what you can handle. And then like a close second is then tailoring whatever you're doing to your audience and what they're kind of asking. But if you put your audience first, like, you're again going to burn yourself out, or you might not have as much fun as you did, because you do have to. I met like lots of young people, like especially during the when I would go to conventions and say like, oh, I'm streaming or I'm making videos on YouTube, but like I don't know like what to do. And I always say, even though it's really generic advice, it's in this type of industry, whatever you want to call it, like there's no ironclad rules. There's nothing that's going to work 100% of the time. But for your own like mental health and your enjoyment, it's like, play what you're having fun with. If you're not really into Fall Guys, or if you're not really into Cyberpunk, but they're popular, like, don't play them, because everyone's playing them. And finding your thing that you can bring to the table. Let's say you're really knowledgeable about, FromSoft games, or you're really knowledgeable about Metal Gear. Do that. Like, go where your knowledge is. Just don't make content for the sake of making content because it's either popular or it's for popular games, because they're popular games for a reason, because everyone's doing it. It's very, very hard to stand out. Like, it's very hard to stand out in anything. Like, let's just say your podcast, like you do have somewhat of an advantage being in Hawaii, because you're saying that there's like not as much as in like other places for coverage like that. So that makes sense. But in like any other place of the world, it's still like there's other avenues where, again, it's really, really difficult for people to pick you out of every other choice there. So again, like I really wish there was some magic thing that you could just, that most people could just do to give them a leg up. But like, sadly, there isn't. Like, my advantage was that I just started early. Like, 2000, like I was making videos by myself, like in 2007, just little random things. Because the very first thing I bought with a credit card that I ever had was get the Street Fighter cartoon DVD set. And I would rip those and make, content out of them. And like, I think back then, like there was the intro of that cartoon on YouTube, and that was it. Like there was no big clips. There was no whatever, because that series had just got released on DVD around that time. So no one really had access to VHS tapes to put them on YouTube. Like, I guess you're like recording on your camera, like at your TV. I don't know how else you would do it, but that was kind of my advantage. And it sucks that not everyone can have that sort of thing, because, when something gets hot, like, content creation or, just online stuff in general, like everyone gets on it and everyone wants to start having fun. They want to start making money, whatever their desire is. So it does kind of suck that, like, it's not something that everyone can find success in nowadays, just because there's so much competition.
Yeah. It's definitely, like, going back to what you're saying about prioritizing yourself and not just putting your audience ahead of you. Now, I actually did that. Like, I want to say I was doing it for probably the beginning, like the December of last year up until like July, August this year, and I completely burned myself out because I my audience had a lot of crossover with another content creator's audience, and that at the time I was cool with, because hey, I mean, sometimes YouTube beefs happen and they can happen over the dumbest shit. But at the time, the other content creator was like my best friend, and he would do certain things, like he did timeline videos, he did a lot of other, like he'd do let's plays like several times a week of certain popular games. And so my audience would cross over with his, and then there's the expectation of his audience coming over, and even my audience, that I would play all the same games. I would play this, I would cover content on that. And I got to a point where I was trying to cater so heavily. I put my audience far above myself. And I burnt out so badly that for like probably a month or 2 months, I just didn't make content, just because I was like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the metrics. I'm covering this game because this is popular. I'm playing this game because this is popular. I'm talking about this product because it's popular. And I'm like, I don't fucking care about this in that same aspect that they do. And when I stopped, and I think I even did a video where I talked about where I'm going with my channel and my content. Like, I'm going to do this because I enjoy it. I understand if you like this, that's cool. You can go there and watch it, or you can look at my old stuff, but this is what I'm going to do for it. I had a lot of pushback from my audience. And, I own up, I take accountability for the fact that I allowed that to become a thing, and it's like, yeah, I have no right to get mad at them because I provided something that they thought was my norm. And I'm like, no, I don't want to cover Resident Evil. Like, I played through the entire Resident Evil series, even all the offshoots from December to May, just because of my audience. Even when
that's a lot of Resident Evil.
Dude, I burnt out so quickly. That I did Silent Hill, did the entire Mega Man X, Mega Man 0, ZX, and Legend series for my audience. All the Mortal Kombat games, all the Street Fighter type, like, and I'm a big FGC guy, but I played through everything.
Like your intro alone.
Not to mention like wrestling games. Like I did all that for my audience, and where my passions was like, I like Final Fantasy 14. I like King of Fighters 11, 13, and 14. I like Killer Instinct. I like Metal Gear. Like, there are things that I want to cover, but I'm not doing it because I'm trying to just placate. And I was so burnt out, and I had some me in my audience telling me, oh, you're just better, you're this, you're that. I'm like, no, I'm just focusing on me right now. Like, I'm prioritizing me.
Yeah, that's the other thing, when if you have an audience, whatever it is, that's like far away from you, like, through the internet, if you're a lifestyle channel, for example, like or a beauty blogger, you're like sharing a lot of like intimate moments and how your life's going. It's a little bit different, but there's still lots of stuff that the audience isn't seeing, like all these other issues, worries, stressors outside that you either don't share for whatever reason you want to, because it's your life. So there's always going to be, unfortunately, that disconnect between your audience and yourself, saying like, yeah, I need to reorganize my channel because of this reason or that reason. And there's always going to be some form of blowback. Like, most of the time people are kind of understanding, but it's always that vocal. It's always that vocal minority that like wants to poke and prod and like, criticize when there really is no real reason to criticize. And because they're not living in your house, they're not in your shoes, so they don't really know, and they're just consuming what you're putting out. And that's the only way they get to know you. And if that changes, then they're like, but that's against the contract that we signed. And like, no, there is no contract. You're just I'm putting out content for you, and you consume it or you don't, whatever it is. So that's one thing that they don't tell you when you go down to the job office and you become content creator, that they don't tell you that that's not something that that is something that will occur no matter what.
Yeah.
The most popular YouTuber or content creator in the world, it has their critics, and there's probably things that they do wrong. And there's probably decisions they make were not great for, for any number of reasons. So unfortunately, it's one of those things where it just comes with the territory. And you have to kind of take when you do go through those hard times of deciding, like, do I keep wanting to do this, or should I change? Should I do whatever? You just kind of have to sort of play it day by day.
Yeah. Even with like the last couple, the last month and a half, 2 months, when my wife and I found out we were expecting, I had another, I did slow down my content because there's another reason aside from that. Like I'm 4 years, almost 5 years in remission.
Right. Yeah.
And I got to a point where I had a scare with my health tanked, and I had to just take time for myself. And then I had a lot of my audience that got mad about that, and I'm like, hey, look, there's parts I just don't share with you guys. Like I'm dealing with this with my health, and I just need to make sure, because if I can hit, and I'm still nervous now, I'm still having some slight health complications, but I'm like, if I can make it to that 5-year mark, I'm cancer free. Okay, cool. But I need to make sure my health comes first.
Definitely.
A lot of people, they don't get that. One of the things I did want to ask, and I do have one more question after this one, but the main one I want to dive into is, like, do you think at this point, becoming a content creator, since that has definitely gone mainstream, do you think that that's still a viable option for people?
Well, I'd say it's definitely not a viable option until it is. Meaning, do not quit your job. Do not quit anything that is consistent in your life to do it. You definitely need to wait to see if you can. Like, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Certainly, especially now. Back then, 2008, 2009, 2010. You're there. Not even close to the amount of competition and things to click on back then. So, a little bit easier for sure. But, nowadays I'd say treat it as a hobby. If you really want to go for it and do it, treat it as a hobby and see where it goes from there. But, do not expect overnight success. Don't expect success in the first year, I'd say. It definitely is easier in some ways, like AdSense being what it is on YouTube, and you being able to set that up very easily compared to again, back in the day. That's why networks, MCNs were such a thing back then, because they were the mediary that did need to be there at first, but now they're not really required. They do still give you some advantages for sure, but I would say, if you do decide, if anyone decides to go for this, then make sure you definitely have a fallback plan in general. And again, don't expect success. Be happy when it comes, if it comes, but don't be hedging all your bets on it, because it's like, it's almost as if just trying to become a celebrity, but it's in a different realm, obviously. But it's the same thing. Like, how do I stand out between all these people that are vying for attention? So it's certainly tougher. It's weird. It's tougher in some ways, and it's easier in a few others. So I'd say in general, that's what you should look out for. And but if you can even make a modest success out of it, or not even financially, but just for yourself, it can still be very rewarding and very interesting. There's nothing quite like it. People wanting an insight into whatever you're talking about, be it video games or fashion or media, whatever it is. So it is very interesting. If you can do it consistently, you can gain even a small audience. And there's also that sweet spot of your audience where they're small enough that you feel like a community and you know certain people, but then you get too big, your net gets casted too far, then you'll get lots of people, and usually a percentage of those people are not very nice. And again, that's another thing that comes with the territory. If you put yourself out there, you're putting yourself out there for anyone to kind of consume whatever you're doing, and you have to be prepared for that as well.
Yeah, you definitely do. I concur with that 100%. But yeah, my last question is, okay, so let's talk about the takeover. Let's talk about game development. How's that, going into this field of game development, how has that been? And let's talk about it.
I'd mentioned a little bit earlier that there are lots of things like I thought I knew, like I thought I knew enough about, oh, this is what you're supposed to do in case that happens. Oh, you need to apply to Steam or to Valve rather to get this done. Oh, wait, how does that get done? Offering up a soundtrack as a download. And I learned a lot. And now that the takeover came out on the Switch, which was like such like almost an out of body experience, like something I helped make, just to clarify, like I was kind of a producer on the project. It was mostly made by one person, Antonis. What up, Antonis? Who basically like programmed, designed like the game itself. I was in charge of, getting a lot of other people to help out on the project. Like I kind of hired the musical talent that contributed to the game. I wrote the story and the cutscenes and directed the voice acting. So I did all the, I'd say tertiary things in regards to, the actual game. All the other elements that Antonis couldn't handle himself, because that's why some games result in some indie games result in like being developed for like 7-8 years, because one guy is doing it all themselves. But I learned a lot in terms of what goes into the general process of when is a game actually done, when is it polished enough, when is it content complete. Oh, we can switch this one last thing. Oh, okay, how's that long? Oh, it's actually going to take longer than that. So, but yeah, let's keep plugging away at it. Like okay, and then eventually you have to kind of decide, okay, no, this is what we're doing. Is it absolutely perfect? No game is absolutely perfect. There's some things you hope to change. And like I said, when I was playing the game earlier on the Switch, like it does take too long to load levels, I think, but it is what it is. It's what could be pushed at the time with the time that we had, and working towards a physical version of the game right now is also, especially in the midst of a global pandemic, has obviously slowed things down. We also want to do we have a PlayStation 4 version done, but during the summer, Sony kind of said, well, you have to make sure that your game also works on a PlayStation 5, because that's a consideration you have to have going forward, that if you do want to opt for it to be playable on a PlayStation 5, it has to work and not crash. So that became an issue. So, and it's very much a collaborative effort, obviously, talking about the Game Awards again, who wins Best Director? I don't think anyone really should. It's gaming, making a huge, massive indie game, making a huge, massive AAA game, especially, like there's multiple directors usually in a project. There's a creative director, there's a main director, there's a lot. So it's a weird title. Certainly indie games, that have like a very few amount of people, one could certainly say that they're the director. But working on this, while Antonis basically, made the game and ultimately called all the shots, I would still try to, speak with him and say, no, I really think this would be better if we do it this way. And if he said yes, he said yes. If he said no, he said no. And if he needed a bit more convincing, then I would try to convince him. So it was a very, very fun process, and it it definitely wasn't a negative one. There were some negative aspects where like, that didn't work out. This didn't work out. But ultimately it still made me very, very proud that I was able to contribute, a pretty significant way to the project, and even it getting a physical version and we getting a partner for that was something I was able to help facilitate. So that's another thing I was quite thrilled about, and I definitely will be doing more of it in the future. Like for sure, there might be stuff in the future that doesn't quite work out, but I'm always going to try because it's something where I think ultimately that I'll be doing more in a full-time capacity, and content creation might be a secondary thing that I'd still love to do, but drastically decrease my output, because for the last, I'd say 2 years, I've produced like a video a day, which is a lot. And sometimes I still think like, I can't, like right now, I just, I'm either having a bad day, there's too many other in real life things going on. So I do see myself kind of decreasing the amount that I'm putting towards that and spending that time better and like increasing the quality of the things I do put out. For the last good long while as well, I've put out one episode roughly of What Happened a week, which is still a lot, but I have a lot of good editors that I work with, and that's why that's even possible. But yeah, game development has been something really interesting. And also Liam, who's studying game design proper, like in how to code and design things more on a programming basis, it helped me out a lot with that stuff too, and giving feedback and testing and everything. So he was pretty invaluable in regards to that as well. So it was really fun, and I can't wait to get into more of it. And the other thing about it is that you have to have patience. As much as I want to jump into the next thing right now, it's like, no, take your time. There's literally no rush. It is, like I said before, going from a consistent, it's weird. It's like going from a consistent office job very, very slowly, try to move over to the new thing. And it's the same way here. Like now, content creation is the consistent job, but I shouldn't drop all of it to then focus on games. It's not the smartest thing. What if a project goes belly up? There's a million reasons why it can. So I'm gonna be just like very cautious, and again, like don't have to rush into things, because that's the other thing I learned. It's like, you if you start rushing into things, you might make mistakes. So yeah, I'm excited for what the future holds in that regard, because I definitely caught the bug, as it were.
Awesome. And yeah, dude, that's gotta say, now, when you have the capability, when this pandemic clears up and everything, I look forward to seeing you out here in Hawaii.
I think you would definitely. I will. We're gonna go to Hawaii at some point for sure. We were talking about it a couple of years ago, so when everything hopefully clears up, we can get that going, and I'll for sure let you know, because it is a place I always kind of wanted to visit, and my wife needed a little convincing. She's like, oh, but it's just like, kind of, it's a cliche to go to Hawaii for a vacation. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still really fun and seems really cool. And she's like, yeah, okay. And I think she saw a few pictures of some beaches, and she's like, okay, let's go. She really enjoys the beach life, and me as well. So you can definitely expect this sometime in the future.
Well, I'll definitely say this. If you guys do decide to come out here, dude, you got a place to stay. My wife and I, we have a 5-bedroom house, and all of our industry friends and content creator friends, every time they come out here, they stay with us. So you got a room. Just say that.
I appreciate the offer.
But yeah, man. I guess I lied. I do have a final question.
Final question. Okay.
Final question. The most important one. Did you have fun?
I can definitively say HD remaster that I had some fun. Yeah, it's a lot of it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Again, man, it was an honor having you on the show. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we go?
No, I mean, if plugging counts, if you want to
Go
see any of
for
the
it.
stuff I do on YouTube, just search for Matt McMuscles. It's funny because I don't have muscles. And you can check me out on there or at Twitter, on Twitter at the same name, Matt McMuscles. And, if you're interested in old school, like Streets of Rage / Final Fight beat 'em up, check out the TakeOver, which is on Switch and Steam right now. But I do want to say, thanks again for having me on. I do a podcast every so often with any other content creators I meet, and I always make sure that I'm like, well, am I gonna, does this kind of fit for me? And I'm very, very glad to say that that this was a great time. So I made a good choice by saying yes to your kind invite. So thanks again.
Thank you for coming on the show, man. It's definitely been an honor as a fan, and I know a lot of us out here in Hawaii. You have a large fan base out here in Hawaii, and
Cool.
I think people are gonna love this episode. And with that being said, people, all links to Matt's social media outlets as well as his YouTube channel and the takeover will be down in the description below. You'll be able to catch this episode of the podcast along with many others on every major podcast outlet from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and Amazon Music, as well as being able to catch the video format for this on youtube.com/Mikhail Kasanova and on twitch.tv/Mikhail Kasanova. And with that being said, Matt and I, we're signing out. Go play the takeover. I'm gonna say it. You know what?
Here you
Fuck
go.
it, I'm blowing smoke. I'm blowing smoke up your ass because it's true. Play Takeover is one of the best, if not the best, beat 'em up of the year for the Nintendo Switch, and one of the best beat 'em ups just literally in the last decade. So go out, play it. Link will be down below. Go check it out. Play it right now. Go check my review. Go check his review and his gameplay of it too. And with that being said, Matt and I sign out. You guys have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I hope it was informative, engaging, and you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you go ahead and leave a rating and a review. It greatly helps out the podcast and helps the platforms that we're on go ahead and promote us more so that more people can check it out. And if you're wondering what all platforms we're on, aside from what you've listened to it on, we're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. And if you want to support the podcast, then we've got Patreon, so patreon.com/Mikhail Kasanova, which allows us to continue doing what we're doing. If you're looking for this in video format, we're also available on twitch.tv/Mikhail Kasanova, as well as youtube.com/Mikhail Kasanova. So with all that being said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast and the #1 podcast in the Pacific, the Kasanova Podcast. You have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.